I'll be speaking with Nick Georges, who climbed an immense building crane in London to call attention to the mistreatment of Palestinians. If you watched our show, you saw his video selfie of himself atop the crane explaining why he did it. He's presently in London. Good afternoon, Nick.
Good afternoon.
Let's first talk about your rather unique protest last week. What gave you the idea of climbing the crane?
Well, many years ago, I used to do tower crane erecting and tower crane work, but I haven't been near a crane or climbed a crane for over 25 years now. But it was something I've done in the past. And I often used to think about publicizing what's going on in Palestine, how I could use my skills. And in life, we all have different skills and abilities. And I think when it comes to advocating for Palestine, we should all use our inbuilt skills and abilities to the best way that we can to advocate and raise awareness for Palestine. Some people write brilliant letters, some people raise money. Climbing cranes was something I did 25 years ago. So I tried to think how I could use that. So I then decided, and I think probably what was an additional spur to this was the horrific bombing, the third bombing of Gaza, or third, fourth, fifth, sixth, I don't know, however many, recently, where 250 innocent men, women and children were murdered in Gaza. 66 children were blown to bits. And this spurred me on to my crane efforts. So I had the idea of flying the Palestinian flag from the top of a big crane. Mm-hmm. So I spent a long time wandering around London trying to find a suitable crane, which was actually quite hard. And in the end, I chose this particular crane, which if you've seen the video, you'll see in the video, is very tall. It had what they call a man basket at the top of the crane, which was meant for a man to stand in when he was rigging the cables on the end of the jib. But the jib is horizontal when he does that. But on these cranes, when they park them at night, the jib is vertical. And so the floor of this little platform is vertical. And as I intended to sleep up there, there was only 2 bars for me to sleep on. So obviously in the night, I was just falling straight through. So my biggest problem was to work out some sort of design whereby I could sleep safely up there for a night without falling 300 foot down. That took a lot of thought and effort. Whatever system I designed had to be carried up in my rucksack. And eventually I came up with a system of ratchet tie downs. It was people think that, you know, you just jump over a fence and climb up a crane. In actual fact, this took me 2 months of a lot of detailed planning, organization and preparation. It took a lot of work and actually cost me quite a lot of money as well to sort out everything that I needed to make it happen as safely as I could and as efficiently, and to try and make it be as successful as I could.
What was the climb up like? There were stairs for a while?
Right. To get onto the crane, first of all, I had to climb. Sorry, just to preempt you, I actually had 2 attempts before I even got to that far. The first time I tried, 4 o'clock in the morning, I had a little adjustable ladder. I climbed over the fence onto the site, put my ladder down, climbed down the other side. The fence had a big security barrier around it. So I then used my ladder again to climb over this barrier and get onto the crane. I got up about 20 feet only to discover there's a ladder, there's different ladders that every section take you all the way to the top of the tower. But what they've done, where the ladder goes through, there's a floor in the bottom of the bit of the crane, and there's a hatchway. And I thought, yes, I'm away. As I started climbing up the ladder, I was so excited. I hadn't been caught. I was going up the crane. Brilliant. I had my very heavy rucksack with me. And then I came to this hatchway that was locked with a chain and a padlock. And I had thought this might happen. So I thought, no problem. I'll climb outside the crane and climb up the crane. But unfortunately, they'd completely put cladding all around the crane, so I couldn't do this. So I was trapped. So in the pitch black, 4 o'clock in the morning, I spent half an hour trying to fiddle with the combinations on this padlock in the desperate hope that I would be able to open it. But I totally failed. I couldn't. So I then realized I had to get down and get out before I got caught. So all the way down, luckily I managed to break out of sight without being seen, went back home, and I went and bought a set of bolt croppers. And that day was so hard, the thought of having to go back again. The last month leading up to this event, I mean, I've done some stuff in my life, but I've never in my life been so stressed and so frightened at the thought of what I was going to do. Don't think I could ever put myself through that again. And that last day was particularly bad. So anyway, I got another taxi again, went back the following morning, put my ladder up, climbed over the fence, back down the other side with my bolt croppers in my bag, climbed over this barrier, and I just got onto the bottom of the crane when the whole site erupted with security guards and dogs and everything. But because I just got onto the crane, they couldn't get up to me. So I was safe. And then I climbed up the 2 sections, got my bolt croppers out, cropped through the chain, pushed the hatch open, and then I was away. And it was all ladders all the way up the first, I suppose, 60 meters to the top of the tower section, where all the equipment, the slew ring and the cabin, everything is. But then the worst bit was I then had to climb up this almost vertical jib. No ladders on there, nothing like that, just angled stays. And the problem was these stays were so far spaced apart and completely the wrong angle that I couldn't stand on them because my feet would have just slipped down. So literally every stay, I literally had to pull myself up. And at 69 years old, my arms and my shoulders definitely aren't what they used to be at all. And literally myself up, I was so exhausted, I just had to hold on and get my breath back for another 5 minutes. And I don't know how long it took me to get that last 40 meters up to the top of the crane. But anyway, eventually I got up there. And then my first priority was to try and make this cat's cradle around this little frame. So I had somewhere safe. There's nowhere to sit or stand or anything up there, just bars. So I was laying on my stomach with my feet dangling down and my head dangling down, looking straight 300 foot down, trying to wrap these ratchet straps round and make myself a little cat's cradle there for sleep on. Eventually I did that. You'll laugh. So what I did, I sort of tried standing on it to test it to see whether it would take my weight or not. Because they're only very thin strands. And then my next job was to fly the flag. And I had a special weight organised and special ropes all sorted out to fly this flag. And I didn't know how that was going to go because it's very difficult just to fly something off a crane. And initially the wind, because of the direction, blew the end of the flag and wrapped it straight around all the greasy cable on the crane. So I had to climb down again and try and reach out and get it off this cable. And then I had to make some holes in the flag and cable tie it somewhere else so it didn't blow through onto these cables. But once I'd done that, the flag actually flew quite well. So that was very pleasing. And then the next day, the wind completely changed direction. So I had to take off the cable ties and let it blow the other way. But the wind was blowing quite well and the flag was flying really well, which I was so delighted about. That was really great.
And you had some kind of smoke device?
Yes, what I did, I managed to get some flares. And what I did, I put them in a pack, black, red, green and white flares, the colours of the Palestinian flag. Wow. Unfortunately, the wind merged them all together. And at a prearranged time with the photographer people below, I pulled them all and nearly burnt my hands. And I held these flares up there, which was really brilliant. You know, the Palestinian flag was flying, the flares were going, you know, from the top of this crane. So that all worked quite well.
Did you hear in the Washington, D.C. protest, they did something like that. This is, you know, the middle of May. And they weren't up on a crane, of course, but they had, you know, the green, the white, the red, and somebody caught a terrific picture of it.
Brilliant.
But we'll send it to you. So you're on top of this crane. You put the flag out, and you lit off the flares, and then you were prepared to stay for a while. What was your idea about that?
Well, the idea was to stay there at least 2 days and 1 night. That was the plan. So I stayed there the first day, and the night came. The day was very hot, but because you're so high, the wind just cut through me in the night, literally. And I was laying on this sort of cat's cradle. I was very unconfident into whether it would hold me or not.
Mm.
And in the end, I just had to put my faith in it. And you can't put anything down up there. There's nowhere to put anything. Everything you take out, you have to tie it on or fix it on or do something. And I had my rucksack. I had a special tie ratchet thing which held my rucksack on. So I managed to lay down in this little cat's cradle with my head on my rucksack. But all that night, I just shook and shivered all night long. The wind was just cutting straight through me. And the next morning, and that night I took some wonderful photographs of the sunset over London. I had absolutely incredible view up there. I could look down all over the Thames. I could see the House of Parliament, and it was absolutely amazing view from up there. Lovely sunsets. And next morning, I couldn't wait for the sun to get up to warm me up, but there was a huge tower block not far away, and that was right in the way of the sun.
Mm.
And eventually, it seemed like hours later, finally, the sun just came up over the top of this building. And I just started to feel a little bit of warmth coming through from the sun, which was great. Yes, there was quite a lot of stuff going on. As I say, there was Sarah Wilkinson was down below. She was an absolute wonderful lady. I couldn't have done it all without her. She bought my whole, that was the thing. Doing this action, I decided when I was going to do it that I would do it completely alone. I wasn't going to involve anyone else. I was going to do the whole thing completely off my tongue. And that way, if it went wrong, if I fell off, no one would get implicated. No one would be involved. It was totally down to me. But obviously, right towards the end, without getting the media coverage, without people like you knowing, it would have been a total waste of time, my going up there.
Mm.
And I was so pleased. I asked Sarah, and she was one of the very, very few people I told about what I was doing. And she was wonderful. She didn't know me very well, but she trusted me. She had faith in me that I was actually going to try and do what I said. And she came down and she photographed, she arranged all the publicity. She did the whole thing. And it's down to her that she brought that whole action alive. And all Al Jazeera, Middle East Eye, Press TV, The Struggle, apparently we've had over 3 million hits on that video.
Wow.
And I've had over 400 direct responses of gratitude direct from Gaza to me for what I've done. So even if nothing else, just those responses from Gaza and the feeling that I've given them made it worthwhile. And Sarah was responsible for all that. So it really was, I had to do my crane bit, but her bit was equally important to make it all worthwhile. So, and also because she was the liaison, she was the only person the police could speak to me through because she had my phone number, which she wouldn't give to the police. Mm-hmm. So all the messages had to be relayed through her. And she had a very difficult job because the police tried to remove all the media people from below. They tried to kick her off the site. And then eventually they realized that she was the only person they could communicate with me through. So they then let her back on again. And they were getting very aggressive with her. They were telling her that they were going to move the crane with me on top of it, precariously balanced on the top, which should have been lethal. They were going to get a helicopter down, but the downdraft would have blown the crane about and probably blown me off. And they were demanding that I came down, and they were getting very heavy.
Now, the Daily Express, the British papers said, quote, "You were hauled down by police." Is that true?
No, this is complete lies and fabrication. And I'll explain what actually happened. When Sarah told me on the phone that they were going to move the crane, I said to her to tell them specifically, if they move that crane 1 inch, I said, I'm going to stand up right on the top. I'm going to take my safety harness off completely. And I said, if the police move the crane, that will be their total responsibility. So the 2 policemen on the ground then phoned their chief superintendent behind a desk somewhere. And he got furious with them. And Sarah could hear this on the loudspeaker thing. And he said, how can you be so stupid? Don't move the crane. Don't stress him. And I'd already agreed to come down an hour earlier anyway, because they wanted me to come down earlier. He said, he's already compromised in the time he's coming down. don't stress him, just leave him in peace and let him come down at his own time, at his own speed, whenever he's happy to come down. Apparently, they'd asked one of the police teams to go up. None of the police teams would go up, which is why I'd chosen this crane, because I knew it would be almost impossible for them to get me down from there. There was no way they could get me down. It was far too high for any ladders or any aerial platforms to get up there. They couldn't get a crane big enough to get near to it. It would take them 3 or 4 days to get anything that size in and rigged. So I knew there was absolutely no way they could actually get to me there.
So when did you decide to come down?
So then I decided, actually it was coming down at 5, but 3:45, I started feeling a bit bad from the sun because I hadn't been able to carry enough weight. I hadn't had enough water up there with me. I'd had very little food because of the weight problem. And I suddenly started to feel the effects of the really boiling hot sun. So I thought, right, this is not a good place to be ill because they'll never get me down. So what I did straight away, I'd saved half a litre of water. I had that. I had my last snack bar. I waited 10 minutes till it had gone through my system. And then I started coming down. And I came down really slowly, really careful, completely unstressed, absolutely in my own time with no one hassling me or putting me under pressure. I had my safety harness, and it took me quite a long time to get down. And it was interesting because afterwards, Sarah said on the ground, there were about 400 people below there watching. She said there was absolute silence when I was climbing down. She said the police turned their radios off. She said the whole building site came to a halt. They all came over and watched. And she said you could have heard a pin drop as I was climbing down that jib. And then finally, when I got to the bottom, they all broke out cheering. And
Wow.
yeah. So,
I didn't see video of that. I hope it is there somewhere.
probably.
What about the Palestinian flag? Did you leave it up flying?
Well, of course I left that up there, and I've no idea. I don't know what they did about getting it down, but the longer it can fly up there, the better. So my flag is still up there, definitely. And my cat's cradle all wrapped around there. So yes, yeah. So that's all still there. But the police were waiting for me when I came down. And believe it or not, I've never been so pleased to see a policeman in my life. I was so relieved to have safely got down. The whole thing was successful. No police, nobody else had risked their lives or anything.
Mm-hmm.
And I got down safely. And I got down onto the ground and my legs went from under me. I collapsed on top of this policeman and I burst into tears on his shoulder, poor man. So yeah, I was very, very pleased to get down. Yes. Yeah.
They did arrest you.
Yes, well, what they did, because they've had a lot of deaths in custody, so they're very concerned about the health of people before they put them in custody. They tried to get an ambulance, but they couldn't. So they put me in a police van and they blue lighted me all the way to St George's Hospital, where I was checked over. And then they took me back to Wandsworth Police Station. They arrested me, read me the riot act and everything. And I was put in a cell overnight and they finally released me in the afternoon of the next day. They did charge me, but I think they charged me with 4 things, but I really wasn't paying that much attention. The main charge, from what I can gather, was that I went prepared to break in with a pair of bolt proppers and that I did damage in that I cut this rusty chain. So I think that's their main charge against me. But I mean, other than that, all I actually did was climb a crane and fly a country's flag. So I don't think I don't know. I mean, you know, with Boris Johnson and his anti-protest bill now, who knows what they're going to do to me.
How did you first get interested in Palestine?
Well, it's a bit of a funny story. When I was 17, I left home and I rode my motorbike and sidecar overland to Cape Town, South Africa. Well, it took me 1.5 years. I got a bit lost on the way and I ended up in Beirut. And as you know, Beirut's not really on the way to Cape Town. I don't quite know how that happened. Anyway, the main road into Beirut was lined with derelict concrete shacks, falling down wooden sheds, miles of torn and tattered tents, filth, squalor, piles of rubbish, hundreds of filthy kids and children. And I was just 17, just fresh out of school. I'd never seen anything like this in my life. And of course, this was all the Palestinian refugees who'd been forced out of Palestine by the Israeli invasion of the Palestinians' own country. And I was shocked and horrified by it. And for 50 years, the Palestinians have been on my heart, but typical me, I've never done anything about it. I've moaned and whinged, but I never did anything. And then about 6 years ago, I got to become a Christian. And that finally, in effect, gave me the boot up the backside to think, right, I really want to try and do something about this. Mm-hmm. And I thought, well, little old Nick, what on earth can he do? And I looked on the internet and I asked about, and eventually a friend put me in touch with an organization that sent people out to Palestine for 2 weeks as a olive halving and protected presence for the Palestinians. Mm-hmm. And my God, what an eye-opener that was. And then I joined.
What year was that, Nick? What year?
That was about 4 years ago. So that, okay. 3 years ago. Yeah, about 3 years ago. And then I came back from that, and I was very fortunate. After years training, I was accepted by this organization, and I was sent out to Palestine for 3 months as a humanitarian witness. And that was just horrific. For 3 months, every day on a daily basis, I witnessed the atrocities and the horrors of the illegal Israeli occupation of the Palestinian homeland. And it was just awful. The worst thing I saw, I was taken to the site of this incident. The incident had occurred about 2 years previously, and it was a burnt out shell of a house. And there was a guide who witnessed the whole incident, who lived about 50 meters away, and he took me there. And a Palestinian family of 4, a mum, a dad, the little boy, and the baby, were asleep in the bedroom. A group of about 12 Jewish extremist settlers came down with an incendiary device they'd got from the Israeli army. They lobbed this incendiary device through the bedroom window of this family while they were asleep. The family woke up on fire. The mother grabbed the baby out of the cot. They rushed out of the house, only to discover that they were still on fire because this incendiary device had white phosphorus in it. The mother realized in a panic she'd just grabbed the blankets and not the baby. The settlers were out there waiting for them with axes to hack them down. The mother died that night. The father died the next day. The next day, the Palestinians gained access and they went in to get the remains of the child out. The heat from this incendiary device was so intense that the body had been completely incinerated. There was no trace of the child. It had melted the aluminium window frames, and the guy had actually rubbed a bit of aluminium off the frame, gave me this bit of melted aluminium. I've still got it at home now.
Where was this? Where in the West?
This was in a village. This was in a village in the West Bank called Dumar. It's quite a well-known incident, and there are lots of different stories about it. But that is the true story about it, which was told to me by the Palestinian guide who lived 50 meters away, who witnessed the event. There are lots of different stories about it, but that is the story I was told by that guide.
Uh-huh. That left a mark on you, obviously.
Another time while I was witnessing, and the demolition, well, what happened when I got back to England, my behavior was very strange. And in the end, my kids forced me to go to the doctor, and the doctor instantly diagnosed me with PTSD from it, which is quite a price to pay. The other things I witnessed when I was out there, there's a small village called Susia, and right on the edge of this village, there's a shepherd, an elderly man and his wife with their flock of sheep. And 25 soldiers, their DCO and the JCB digger machine came down, demolished his tent and took everything away from them. Anyway, a few weeks later, the Palestinian got another tent. He came back with his sheep and he carried on shepherding there. Anyway, while I was there 4 times, 25 soldiers, the DCO, the JCB machine, in the 3 months I was there, came down to demolish his tent and his home. And the last time, he didn't even put a tent up. He put a tiny little box that his wife and himself could just squeeze into to sleep at night. But they had to build a shelter, a very ramshackle shelter with a canvas top, just to keep the sun off the sheep. The last time the Israeli army came down, they dismantled and wrecked his shelter for the sheep. And I've got this lovely video of the Israeli DCO speaking to this poor shepherd, saying, look, this is a female DCO, she said, if I come down 4 times, I've been down to demolish your home. If I come down one more time, your work permit will be revoked and you and all your family will be put on the blacklist, which is like a death sentence. And if they can't work, they can't survive, they can't do anything, they're never issued any permits, they can't go anywhere. It's more or less like, so the poor shepherd gave up, he went back to the refugee camp in Yatta. I've seen them demolish schools, clinics. I've seen them demolish water wells. I've seen the army go in with JCB diggers and dig up all the water pipes to a small village of 14 families.
You mentioned JCB, is that a British firm?
Yeah, and JCB is a huge British, and they've got big branches in America, and they make all these digger machines. And they're almost exclusively, them I think in Michigan and Caterpillar, but mainly JCBs were exported exclusively to Israel to do all these demolitions for the Israeli army. They're exported illegally by JCBs. There's various UN rules and conventions which say they're not allowed to be used in illegal settlements or for illegal purposes against international humanitarian laws, but still the British government won't stop them. And JCB, I've written letters to them, I've gone on protests, as have many other people. JCB's wonderful British company, make wonderful machines, but they just don't need to export them to Israel. But we've had no success whatsoever with that. And protesting is so hard. I mean, since 1948, people have been protesting. They've been writing to their MPs. They've been doing peaceful protests. And now, 70 years later, none of it's had any effect. The Palestinians have less rights, less land. Hundreds of thousands of Palestinians have been killed. And these peaceful protests and writing to our MPs make no difference. Our MPs, a government is supposed to rule by the consensus of its people. And the way it knows, the system in England, is they tell their concerns to their MPs then voice that to government. That system does not work. It's completely inefficient. The MPs don't listen, the government doesn't listen. So what is left to us? How else can we tell the government of our concerns? And we're concerned for justice, for international humanitarian law. So the only thing that's left to us is protest. And now the government is even trying to ban us from protesting. And they're imprisoning us, not for doing bad crimes, not for killing people, not for stealing, for theft or anything bad, but because we care about injustice and suffering. And we're being imprisoned and banned because of that.
Now,
our government.
In terms of protest, the media said that you had been arrested for another action, I believe on an Elbit building. What happened there? I don't want to compromise any of your legal rights, but what can you say about this?
Well, basically what happened, so I got back from Palestine 3 years ago, and I've spent 3 years writing, doing peaceful protests, doing everything I can, none of which makes any difference. I then heard about this protest group, Palestine Action, who do real active live protests. And through them, I heard, I didn't know about this, that this Israeli armaments manufacturing company, Elbit, has 10 factories on English soil manufacturing armaments. They manufacture 85% of the drones used by the Israeli army in their destruction and killing of the Palestinians in Gaza. And what was new to me was that they also manufacture white phosphorus bombs, which were used in this incident, this horrific incident I saw. And once I heard about that, the people in this Palestine Action said, would you like to do an action with us? And I said, yes. Along with 6 other activists, in the middle of the night, we climbed onto the roof of one of the Elbit factories in Shenstone, where they manufacture the engines for these drones. We spent the night up there. And the next morning with sledgehammers, we smashed all the windows in the factory. We damaged the roof and we sprayed the whole factory with red paint, indicative of the red Palestinian blood that had been spilt by that factory. Now, I broke the law. I went up there and I broke some windows. but that is nothing compared to the machinery that comes out of those factory doors, the death, the destruction, the suffering that comes out of those factory doors that I have witnessed with those bombs. I have no problem breaking those windows. I've never broken a window in my life. I've never been in trouble with the police in my life, but I didn't have any problem breaking the windows on that factory. And yes, I'm going to go to court for it soon. And my maximum possible sentence is 10 years. I don't know what's going to happen. Nobody knows. But I still believe what I did the right thing. It's all about raising awareness for Palestine, the horrendous way that Israel is treating the Palestinians. Israel has all the power. It is the fourth biggest military nuclear power in the world. The Palestinians have nothing. They don't even have their own electricity, their own water. They may throw one or two ancient rockets about, but they've got every right to defend themselves against what Israel is doing to them.
Now, I wanted to end maybe on a positive note. I mean, the rally, I guess it was in London, was said to have had 180,000 people in support of Palestinians a couple of weeks ago. I think that was the biggest in the world for Palestine. In America, we had a lot of rallies, but they were all much, much smaller. Were you part of that, or were you encouraged by it?
Yes, there was one about a week before in Whitehall where we managed to shut off the whole of Whitehall, and I was there for that. I couldn't, unfortunately, get to that one, but yes, that was hugely encouraging and a really positive. There are definite signs that despite the power of Israel crushing the Palestinians in Palestine, the power Israel has over the media, the minute we protest, the minute we say anything about Palestine, they completely delegitimize our voices by accusing us of anti-Semitism, completely falsely accusing us of anti-Semitism. There's nothing anti-Semitic about trying to stop what Israel is doing to the Palestinians, the fact they're breaking international humanitarian law. That is not anti-Semitic. So it's so difficult for our voices to get heard. And they make such huge efforts to crush our voices that to see 180, 190,000 people out there protesting and getting past this barrier that they crush our democracy with was really positive and really encouraging. And I think people more and more now, gradually, the world is coming to see the truth and the reality of what is actually going on in Palestine and what Israel is doing. And hopefully, the more people see that, the more our governments eventually might realize they can't keep turning a blind eye to it.
My gosh, it was a great interview. I really appreciate you talking with me, and we'll get this out.
Well, it was very good to talk to you, Stanley. Thank you very much. And thank you very much for letting me speak about Palestine. It's so nice to be able to speak about it openly. And all I can say is what I've seen and what I've witnessed. And that's all I can say. So thank you very much, Stanley. And I wish you all the best in your efforts to spread the word about what is happening in Palestine as far and wide as you can. Thank you.